Let's speak to Matthew Laza, who's the former Labour Special Advisor, an all-round good bloke, despite the previous title. Matthew, nice to have you.
Thank you very much. Brilliant to be with you, Ian.
Good to see you. I mean, this case is it's so disturbing from all the obvious headlines and what we now know about a serial murderer in a children's, a baby's ward, as it were. As I mentioned in that intro there, you would hope that there is a system in place that if you flag this and you're somebody with some level of credibility, and I would imagine, senior paediatricians would be listened to.
Yes, absolutely.
But only to be told, you shouldn't be really making a fuss. We think everything's fine. In fact, you might have upset her, so you should probably say sorry to her.
It's extraordinary, absolutely.
What the hell is going on?
Absolutely extraordinary. And I think that, as you said, the hospital managers seem to be more concerned about protecting the reputation of the hospital than they were about protecting the patients. Yeah. And what really worries me, look, I'm somebody who's, spent their whole life campaigning for the NHS. My party is, every leaflet we put out mentions the NHS. But all those who believe in the NHS needs to remember that it's there, there's a clue in the title, it's a service. It's there to serve the patients. It's there to serve the country. It's not there to be protected as an institution. I'm not interested in institutions. I'm interested in outcomes and people. And I think that one of the worrying things we've seen with the sort of treating of the NHS as almost a sort of national secular religion is that we can then people become too scared to criticise it in general debate, and that obviously has been fed through in this disastrous way right down into the way it works, as you say, at the coalface.
And I think it works on a number of levels. I think there are, Matthew Said wrote a great book called Black Box Thinking, where he makes that point about the NHS very rarely learning from mistakes, because you have junior clinicians who are scared to say something to senior clinicians because that's not the pecking order, the God complex kicks in and all the rest of it. And in this case, you've got managers refusing to listen to very senior medics. And I find that incredible when what they were discussing here was the death of babies. This wasn't about the fact that, we could do with a new plug socket in Ward 7.
Yes.
This was about
where the cleaning contract's going.
Correct. Yeah. This was about the death of patients.
Absolutely. And it seems to me that it's all become a sort of about defending the corporate entity. Those managers see themselves as managers they would in any other business. That it's all about looking after the institution, whether that be the particular hospital trust and then the wider NHS. I mean, that's, as somebody who was a journalist for a long time, you'll know as well as I do how big the press offices are in these hospitals, how they use access for broadcast crews to get in there as a bargaining chip in what stories are covered. And it just reminds you that, we need to stop this culture that it's about protecting the corporate entity. The NHS is about serving patients and obviously about protecting those patients while they're in the NHS's care. If we don't address these concerns, then big questions about the future of the NHS will be raised.
Absolutely. And people shouldn't be scared about whistleblowing, as it's called. We're going to talk to a couple of guests on this very point in just a bit. But it is that if something is afoot when it's about life and death, you should be able to shout from the rafters on that.
Totally. And, the clinician this morning calling for regulation for managers, I totally agree with. And it's not just managers. I don't know about your GP's practice, but, my GP's practice, even way before COVID, moved to a system where it's entirely based on the telephone and you can be dragged in only in emergency.
Yes.
And, I actually managed to burn drop to the lasagna on myself. They've never seen it in the GP's practice. They've just had a couple of photos sent on WhatsApp. 3 years later, I've still got a scar. But obviously that's not the most serious example. But the people who answer your call, I said this to the doctor. I said, "You're asking me to discuss my most intimate medical history with somebody at the end of the phone who's not regulated, who doesn't share the Hippocratic oath and everything you've signed up to, who could walk out on the street and tell their mates in the pub without any comeback." So all the way through the NHS, there needs to be regulation of those people who aren't clinicians, as well as the obviously regulation we have for clinicians.
Indeed. Sorry, I'm slightly dwelling on the pasta incident, the lasagna.
You mean, how did I manage to...
Well, later on we're going to be talking about Edinburgh's greatest one-liners, and there must be one in that somewhere. A man dropped a pasta on his chest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The answer is never, always put a shirt on when you take lasagna out of the oven. Don't give too much information.
Why were you making a lasagna topless?
Oh, well, I was putting it out of the oven with a hangover, is the honest
answer. Was this a date night? No,
it was more on a Sunday afternoon when I was managed just about to shove some fruit in the oven. We're reading too much about my
Indeed, we're learning more about Matthew every time he comes in. Big firm bosses pay rose by 16%. Big number, of course.
Yeah.
It's not... we know that there have been pay rises, and there's links to inflation and all the rest of it with that. But the biggest bosses of the bosses of Britain's biggest companies saw their pay rise 16% on average last year. Most workers saw some kind of squeeze taking place. Difficult one, this, of course, because I said at the intro, you know, if you own it, you can pay yourself what you like, can't you?
Yes, but they don't own it. We own it. We own these FTSE 100 businesses, and on the way here, you know, it's in all our pensions, it's in our ISA savings pots, you know, etc. So, you know, we're all relying on the performance of these businesses, and clearly they're taking out more than they grow, because I had a quick look, and over the last year, the FTSE 100 has fallen. So, yes, OK, individual companies within that have risen and they've fallen, but it's not like these are individual entrepreneurs. This is not like the person who runs the business round the corner where they own it lock, stock and barrel. They're running it on behalf of the shareholders, and we are the shareholders through our investments.
It is interesting, because I would have also thought, and I say this from a capitalist perspective, but if I was already earning 3.5 million, I'd probably go to the board and go, I don't really need a pay rise, actually.
Especially in the current climate.
Yeah,
and
literally don't need one.
Exactly, you literally don't need it. How are you going to spend it? And the other thing, of course, is, you don't want, if you're trying to keep wages down for your company, or at least keep it in sensible terms, it doesn't help. I thought the most extraordinary thing in this today is whenever, in all the stories reporting this today, there's a quote at the end saying, we contacted the Treasury for comment and they didn't have anything to say. There was no comment from the Treasury. They don't have no comment when workers are asking for not an inflation busting, but an inflation matching pay rise.
That's a good point.
So I thought that was pretty telling.
Here's another area they often don't have a comment because they've got nothing to say now. Rishi Sunak admits he may not stop channel migrants by the end of by the next election. I've said this constantly, Matthew. It doesn't matter whether you're left wing, right wing, green, whoever you are. Everyone can say this is completely unacceptable. Whether you look at it from a humanitarian perspective, whether you look at it from an issue of where you house people, what our moral duty is, you can't have 700 people a day turning up in boats on the shore, arriving in the UK. And
people dying en route, as we've seen so tragically.
And the Prime Minister...
Of course, it needs to be stopped.
Yeah, big pledge from Rishi, I'm going to sort this out. None of them have sorted it out.
No, look, it is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, he said... I mean, let me quote what he said today. I mean, I don't normally like to quote him, but he said, oh, yeah, I'm not going to meet the pledge. Going to be honest with people. It's a complex problem. Well, no... Sherlock is all I can say. You know, it didn't take a genius to tell him that. It didn't take a well-paid advisor to tell him that.
Absolutely.
And you couldn't have a bigger testament to Tory failure, because he knows now it's a complex problem.
Yep.
He knew when he made the pledge he wasn't going to meet it. It was all politics. It was all driven by these Aussie political consultants who sit in number 10, who bring over the phrases that worked in Australian politics, but they're not backing it up with the policy. And, we need a proper plan to stop the boats, and we need people to be honest that it can't happen instantly, but it needs to happen, and it needs to be about fixing it, not grandstanding with the things like Rwanda. Let's remind ourselves there's not a single migrant on the barge. There's not a single migrant in Rwanda today.
The only person that's been to Rwanda is actually Suella Braff.
Absolutely. Well, I'm pretty. Then we've sent more Home Secretaries on fact-finding trips.
More Home Secretaries than migrants.
Absolutely.
There you go. That tells you everything. Matthew, thank you. Good to see you. Matthew Laza with us here on TalkTV.